Hi everyone, and today I am filming a video on the types of OCD. Now OCD stands for Obsessive Compulsive Disorder, and it is characterised by obsessions, which can be intrusive thoughts, worries, images that come into your mind, or certain ideas or impulses, and compulsions can be things that are sometimes in response to the obsessions, which can include lots of different things, and they can be overt, which means the outer ones, such as hand washing, rituals, reassurance seeking, confession, checking things, opening, closing doors, avoidance, and many other things. And these compulsions can be debilitating, as they can be time consuming and make you late to places, and they can make you unable to do certain things. And the avoidance can also mean that you are avoiding going certain places or avoiding doing certain things. And there's also covert compulsions, which are in the mind. So that can be, if you have an intrusive thought, you might try to neutralise it by thinking the opposite. So if you have a phrase, you might think the opposite of that phrase. Or if you have a vivid sort of imagery coming to your mind as an intrusive thought, you might try to rethink that without the bad thing happening. And covert compulsions can also include rumination, which is sort of almost like overthinking, where you're thinking, why did I think that? Or maybe you're trying to figure something out to try and get an answer, because with OCD it's also termed the doubting disease. So it sort of gives you an intolerance to uncertainty. And sometimes the mental compulsions can include visualizing something to prevent something bad from happening. If that's the case, then it's called magical thinking, if you think that something bad may happen if you don't do the compulsion. And there's also a lot more. So people might have mental rituals as well. Now, the first type of OCD I'm going to be talking about today is Scrupulosity OCD / Morality OCD. I'm not too sure if that's how you pronounce it, but I hope it is. But this is a form of OCD that is usually associated with religion, but it doesn't always have to be. So in the religious case, people might excessively pray or read scriptures or, keep going to church over and over again. And this isn't normal religion. It becomes an obsession because people might be terrified. Like, what if they're not doing it correctly? What if they are sinning? What if they aren't praying correctly? And that can cause a lot of anxiety for some people, as they are living in fear because they don't know if they're doing it right or not. And with the morality side of things, it can sort of, you question every single action you do. Is it the right action? Because for some people it can feel like if you get one action wrong or do one wrong thing, then it feels like everything's going to mess up, as you're sort of overthinking everything. You think that it's going to lead on to something else, and then it will send you in the wrong direction. That's what it feels like. And people might also worry about, are they feeling the right thing? If it's based on morality, they may worry, are they being empathetic enough? Are they having the right emotional response to a situation? They might question every thought. They might avoid doing things because they're so terrified that they might be doing the wrong thing, or, doing something bad without even knowing it. So that form of OCD can be debilitating, as it can make it very, very difficult to do everyday things. And for some people, they might always feel like they're doing the wrong thing, and it can cause a lot of anxiety. And it can also, you can also have intrusive thoughts about religion, so what you're most against, if it's a negative thought about religion when you're highly religious, because intrusive thoughts can often be ego-dystonic, meaning they're what you're most against. And you may also have intrusive thoughts that go against your morals, values and beliefs, so that can be very distressing for some people. And you might also have intrusive thoughts and worries and anxieties, and obsessing over whether you're doing the right thing. For example, with my morality OCD, I kind of had an obsession with gratitude, and I was constantly thinking, am I being grateful? Am I taking this for granted? The problem is, if you're thinking that, then you're just really anxious all the time if you're constantly thinking that. So, it can be debilitating, as it makes it difficult to do anything. You can live in high anxiety. Number 2, Perfectionism OCD. Perfectionism OCD is a form of OCD where people have the literal need to be seen as perfect, and it can cause so much anxiety, and they feel like they have to do everything perfectly, they have to do everything right, because if they do it wrong, it can feel like extreme anxiety and intense shame. Even though most people would be able to brush it off, it causes so much anxiety because it's an obsession. Number 3, Sexuality OCD. Some people have a form of OCD where they might question their own sexuality, and they might worry, what if they're gay? There's nothing wrong with being gay, of course, but some people might have that sort of obsession because it's the uncertainty. They might question their own sexuality. And it could include ruminating, trying to figure things out about their sexuality, or worrying that if they looked at something, does that mean that they are secretly gay or something? So that can be distressing for some people. Number 4, relationship OCD. Relationship OCD is a form of OCD where people might question, are they secretly going to cheat on their partner? Are they in love with somebody else? Are they good enough for their partner? Is their partner going to leave them? And this can cause a lot of anxiety and reassurance seeking, and it can be very distressing for some people because people with relationship OCD, they know that they're not going to secretly cheat on their partner, and they know they're not in love with anybody else, but it's the uncertainty, and it feels like there's no way for these people to prove it. Number 5, existential OCD. Existential OCD is a form of OCD where people involuntarily obsess over very deep questions, sometimes questions of the universe and stuff. So this could be the meaning of life, for example, or why do we have love? Why do we do this? Why do we do that? And then the rumination can take hold, and it feels like you can't focus on anything else, it feels like you need to find an answer to this. Because sometimes it can feel like, well, if you don't find an answer, it causes anxiety because of the uncertainty, but sometimes it can also feel like if you feel an answer, if you can't find the answer, are you a bad person? But this form of OCD can make everything seem pointless, because when you're constantly questioning involuntarily the meaning of everything, it feels like every action you do has no meaning, and it feels like there's absolutely no point. So this form of OCD can have a massive impact on somebody's mental health and quality of life, because it's just living in a world where you don't see the point in anything. Number 6, Tourettic OCD. Tourettic OCD is a form of OCD that is associated with Tourette's, but most people in the Tourette's community do actually have classic OCD, but Tourettic OCD is where, rather than obsessions and intrusive thoughts, an individual has premonitory urges. Therefore, it's mainly just compulsive OCD. So, for example, for me, I had out-of-body sensations that were before my rituals, and there was no intrusive thought or obsession present that was fueling it. It was just a physical sensation, which means that CBT and ERP aren't always that effective for Tourettic OCD, because CBT focuses on thoughts, but it's not thought-related, and ERP can make it worse due to the suppression element. So it can be sometimes more difficult to treat and manage, so it usually follows the same sort of treatment path as Tourette's and tics. But it can be very difficult to live with, and a lot of people, when they tell doctors, they don't actually have the obsessions. They might not understand because, for example, when I was younger, we were just told that I was probably concealing the intrusive thoughts and obsessions, but it was actually that it was more physical for me. And Tourettic OCD can be just as debilitating as classic OCD, because the rituals can make you lose your ability to do daily tasks. I lost the ability to dress myself and walk upstairs due to these rituals, and it took 8 hours out of my day. So although it may not be as mentally distressing, the physical impact can be detrimental and mean that, again, you're late everywhere because the rituals are taking up so much time and you physically can't stop it. Number 7, pure O OCD. Pure O OCD is where people have a lot of obsessions and intrusive thoughts, but no outward compulsions. But an individual may have compulsions in the mind, like I was talking about, like neutralizing compulsions and trying to think the opposite of the thought. And some people might have a sort of intrusive thought that sounds like their mind's arguing with them. So they might have an intrusive thought saying, you have AIDS or something, and then they might be compelled to argue with it because they are terrified that if they don't argue with it, then it might come true. And some people might have mental rituals to try and prevent bad things from happening, or to try and reverse a negative thought. Number 8, Hom OCD. Hom OCD is a form of OCD where people are terrified that they might have accidentally harmed someone, or that they may do in the future. And this can cause a lot of memory checking, where people might try and go back to events and try and prove to themselves that they didn't harm anybody. And sometimes it's almost like the mind can make things up and make you worry about it because they're so uncertain. You don't know whether you harmed somebody. And it can cause avoidance of sharp objects or even going outside. So it can be debilitating again. And some people might have compulsions, thinking things such as, if they step on this crack, then their friend may die, and that's a form of magical thinking as well. So it can be very, very difficult and distressing to live with, and some people might have horrific intrusive thoughts about people being harmed, or themselves being harmed, or animals being harmed, and so on. So it can be very, very, very distressing for some people, especially with like the emotional connection to the intrusive thoughts, because that can cause such severe anxiety for some people. Number 9, time OCD. Time OCD is where people may constantly focus on things, and sometimes you might question, am I doing this too fast or am I doing this too slow? But the fact that you're constantly focusing on what you're doing and trying to do it at a certain rate can be incredibly time consuming and make it difficult to focus on anything else. Number 10, checking OCD. Checking OCD is a form of OCD where people are compelled to check things. For example, the outward compulsions can include checking that you turned off the lights, or checking that you turned the stove off, or checking that you locked the doors. Most people might, do this once maybe, but with OCD, it's constant anxiety and uncertainty, and your mind just won't let it go. And therapies can help, but it's not that simple. You can't just stop. It's a process. So it can be very, very difficult for some people, as it causes immense anxiety, and your brain's constantly reminding you to check this, check this, check this. And it seems like a cycle because it fuels and it goes on and on. There's also mental checking, so the covert compulsions, where people might memory check. So they might, again, go back to something and check that something bad didn't happen or that they didn't do anything wrong. It can include emotion checking, so feeling how you're feeling in your body, seeing if you're feeling the right emotion in regards to the situation. It can include thought checking, reviewing every single thought you have, which can be incredibly time consuming and mean that you cannot focus on anything else. It can include, recalling things into your conscious mind, because you might worry that you have forgotten something, or you might worry that you don't know something, and you might have the idea that if it's not in your conscious mind using your inner voice, then you must have forgot it and you have to try and prove it to yourself. It can also include people checking, where you're checking how other people are reacting, and it can also be sensation checking, where you're checking the sensations in your body. So there's lots of different types of mental checks as well. Also, intention checking is a massive thing that I had, where I was worried that everything I did, I had to try and prove to myself and validate it in my mind that I had good intentions. And the intention checking can be really difficult because your mind's constantly going to past events or ruminating over what you have just done, and it feels like you can't clear your mind of that because you're constantly compelled to check. Number 11, sensory motor OCD. Sensory motor OCD is a form of OCD where people cannot get their awareness off of some bodily functions such as breathing, blinking, heart rate, or other things. So it could be anything really, but these people, they literally cannot get their awareness of certain things, even their swallowing, but it could be they are constantly focusing on their breathing. They try to distract themselves, but because the awareness on their breathing is so strong, they don't know how to get it off, and they get so anxious because they worry, am I ever going to get my awareness off of this? I've had the bit with breathing where I cannot stop focusing on my breathing, and it can make things difficult, like getting to sleep, because you're constantly focusing on it, and that makes you breathe in a very strange pattern. So that can be very bothersome for some people. Number 12, hoarding OCD. Hoarding OCD is a form of OCD where people may hoard useless objects, or, for example, they might even hoard spit in their mouth because they might be afraid to get rid of it, or they might have a certain number of objects. Some people have a special number. For example, I used to like the number 3 and I used to hate the number 4. There can be, some people also hoard items that they worry they may need in the future, and the uncertainty can cause immense anxiety, so they just might not throw anything away. And that can be debilitating, as it can lead to a lot of clutter and anxiety. Number 13, emotional contamination OCD. Emotional contamination OCD is a form of OCD where you worry that you might accidentally transmit your emotions to others, or that you might catch emotions of other people. So sometimes it might lead to avoiding people if you are feeling a negative emotion, and it might lead to attempting to repress the emotion within yourself, which sounds very bizarre, because we know that our obsessions are ridiculous, but we can't control them, and our mind is just obsessing over these things. So we try and sort of suppress it, or have compulsions to try and prevent us from passing our emotions on to others, or we might avoid people who are in a bad mood or something. Number 14, germophobia OCD. Germophobia OCD is where somebody might be absolutely petrified of germs and dirt or getting ill, and sometimes it can be linked to the fear of getting sick, which is emetophobia. But this form of OCD can cause someone to have hours worth of hand washing, which can lead to your hands becoming red and raw and have rashes and stuff. And it can lead to obsessive cleaning and scrubbing that takes hours. It can lead to lots of different things. It can lead to avoidance of dirt. It can lead to an avoidance of shaking hands and being near people. So it can have a massive impact on somebody's life. And also, the hand washing, interestingly, can also occur in Tourettic OCD, because I had the hand washing. I would wash my hands for hours, but for me it wasn't linked to contamination. It was actually that I had a sensation on my hands that I couldn't get off. And that was also the same with the cleaning thing. Sometimes I had the urge to wipe things because I felt like there was a sensation there, an out-of-body sensation, which is termed a phantom tic. So there's sort of different types. It could be germophobia, it could be sensation-based for some people. Number 15, just right OCD. Just right OCD is where things need to be just right, and it can be linked to symmetry or putting things in a certain place, evening things out, and for some people it can be ordering things or trying to get things lined up in a specific place. For example, I used to spend about 40 minutes lining my shoes up whenever I came in the house because I felt like there was a sensation around it and I could not get it just right. And when I was trying to do like homework and stuff when I was really young, I would try and line my pencils up, but if they were straight then they were too perfect, but if they were wonky then they weren't straight enough, and it caused a lot of distress because I could not get it just right and I just couldn't win with that. And it can again be linked to Tourettic OCD if it's sensation based. Number 16, paedophilia OCD. Paedophilia OCD is where people have horrific intrusive thoughts about being a paedophile, and it is important to know that intrusive thoughts are ego dystonic, so they are what you are most against. But people with this form of OCD often feel intense shame and don't open up to anybody about it for years because they might think that there's something wrong with them as a person. But it's important to have the awareness of this type of OCD because people need to know that it isn't them doing these things, and these people might be terrified that they're secretly a paedophile, but again, it's ego dystonic. And also, thankfully, a lot of mental health professionals will know about this, but GPs need to know about it and stuff so that if somebody opens up about it, they are not accused of being a paedophile, and they know that they have a mental health condition, which is OCD, and it's an obsession because it causes them so much anxiety and it's what they are most against. Now, pretty much anything can be an obsession, and it's also important to know that you can have more than one type of OCD and you can have more than one type at the same time. From this list, I think I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. From that list of 16, I've had 13 types, so you can have more than one type of OCD and at the same time. But obsessions can be anything, so it can be, again, numbers. Some people might have special numbers that they like, and for example, I used to tap things in threes and open and close doors in threes, so I'd go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and keep doing things like that and tapping things in that pattern. And some people don't like certain numbers, so I didn't used to like the number 4, and I don't actually know why, but I didn't. And some people also avoid certain colours or symbols, and it can be linked to like intense superstition, maybe. So, for example, I actually had a thing where if I saw a negative symbol or something, I was terrified whether I'd caused it, which is a weird obsession that I had, but yeah. And some people will have things that are similar to mental tics as well, which is random images, phrases, sounds, and shapes that come into the mind. These aren't necessarily ego dystonic because they're just random. For example, for me, I had like images of art flash up, and that's all I was aware of. I wasn't aware and couldn't even see anything around me. And I also had shapes come into my mind that would go symmetrical and sort of go in like a pattern, and I couldn't get that out of my mind. And I also had an intrusive thought where I imagined like something on my head or something here. So they can be very, very random thoughts that you cannot stop. They might not necessarily be linked to compulsion, so they can also be mental tics as well. I think it's really important to talk about OCD, especially on this channel, because it affects approximately 60% of the Tourette syndrome community, and it's also one of the main features of PANDAS and PANS. So I think it's important for me to talk about it on this channel. But OCD is also highly stigmatised, and a lot of people think it's sort of like a quirk or a personality trait, when in fact it's a serious mental illness that really ruins people's lives. And it isn't just being neat, it isn't just being tidy, it isn't just being organised at all. It is a debilitating mental illness. So people need to know this so that people with OCD are taken seriously and can get the support they need. And so that people know what it is, because people might be living with these thoughts and think there's something wrong with them and there's not. So it's really important to be aware of OCD and how it can affect somebody. Thank you for watching. Bye!